The pot, Thomas.
One, and we are recording with Mr. Michael Vecchione. And if you thought we couldn't top the last story we did about the used condom salesman or saleswoman or both, I suppose, this one is perhaps even a little more absurd. But before we start, please introduce, or I guess as we start, please introduce yourself for all the new listeners, Mr. Vecchione.
Sure. Michael Vecchione, and I was the chief of the rackets division in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office until I retired in 2013. I had been there for about 30 years all total. And I also spent about 10 years in private practice. So I've seen many cases from many different perspectives and many investigations from the same different perspectives. But the one we're about to talk about today, it's a little different because it's not one of these violent cases. It's
not at all. Yeah.
Case that is kind of in the category of a comedy, really, when you think about it. And it was one that made us all laugh at the DA's office when we uncovered what we will talk about in a few seconds. So that's what we're going to talk about. Hopefully your listeners and viewers will enjoy it. I think it's going to make them laugh a little bit. So
yeah.
So you want to ask me a question, or do you want me to start, or what?
You can take whatever way you want. So for everyone listening, we've gone through a couple of these stories before. Obviously, you can see the books over his shoulder are also the ones we've talked about, which are available on Audible. Not all of them on Audible, but they are all on Kindle. Friends of the Family, Crooked Brooklyn, and then obviously Behind the Murder Curtain with Special Agent Bruce Sackman. And we've gone through several of these stories before, the kind of shorter ones, Hand to the Killer, Murder on the Bridge. We've done these sort of lighter ones, or the maraschino cherries. Last time, obviously, as I said at the beginning, we talked about the used condom saleswoman. So these are just kind of more of the absurd stories from your time as the chief. And again, for anyone interested in these, the stories or your books are more so just kind of larger collections and more fleshed out versions of these stories. But this one is, in comparison to, just blood and rape and burning bodies and seemingly horrific things we normally talk about. Yeah. This one's a better pace. Not light for the guy that, got fucked out of his mortgage or his purchase at an auction. But this one is a little more, I guess, all things considered. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little more, not rape and leaving other men's semen on a body.
It's correct. Not a violent crime, but we in the rackets division did many, many different kinds of cases, and not all of them were, blood and guts. There were a lot of fraud cases, and it's not to minimize, as you said, the hurt that was that the victim of the fraud suffered, because that's not really what I'm talking about. It's the way that this fraud was perpetrated that gave us a chuckle at the office. And it's one, though, that is very, very I guess apropos of even today, because the way that this individual, who the victim was, had his house essentially stolen from him, can happen today, and does happen today, and can happen to anybody. So it's kind of I don't want to say a lesson, but there is a lesson in here for people who do own houses, and they shouldn't take necessarily things for granted about the security of the paperwork that they have. For instance, a deed. A deed can be forged pretty quickly, and then the fraudster and the forger can take the deed and pretend that the house is his and go and borrow money on it. And then when he defaults on it, the real owner of the house becomes liable for that money. So this is the kind of thing that I think people need to pay attention to and to worry about, especially homeowners, because they are vulnerable. So why don't I get into this, and let's see what you think, Tom, and of course you can stop me with any questions, but let me tell you, the name that I call this, and this is not part of any collection of stories yet. I mean, I have so many that I can't put them all into for publishing all at one time, but I'm working on it. In fact, Tom, I'm working on a new book right now and I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit and I'll get back to this. I'm working on a new book now. I've done about 8 chapters already, and I'm calling it a true crime fantasy. And basically what it is a way of taking my true crime stories, ones that several we've talked about, another that we hadn't talked about, and weaving them together with a kind of an overall, I don't know, an overarching place for these stories. And that is the fantasy part. And it has to do with the evil one, the devil, presenting himself in Brooklyn and creating chaos and causing things to happen that he feels will undermine and tear at the fabric of what Brooklyn has become. And the crimes that he is behind and he has incentivized are the cases that I've done, and I'm putting them into that kind of a setting. So we'll see if it works. I haven't pre-sold this. I'm going to write the entire book and then sell it. I have talked to one publisher who loves the idea, and she is interested in doing something with it once I'm finished with it. So
this isn't the same as Murder Is My Business, right?
No, Homicide Is My Business.
Homicide Is My Business
is completely finished.
Okay.
It is the story of a Sicilian hitman who claims that he only killed people who deserve to be killed, and came to the United States looking to become a man of honor. And in his world, a man of honor means a made man in the mafia. If this can be a title, he was an excellent killer. He was terrific at his job. It was the way that he presented himself and how he looked and the way that he spoke that I believe were the detriments to him becoming a made man in the Bonanno family, which is where he wanted to kind of reside once he came to America. So that book is done. It's actually probably on its way to the printer because I finished the last edit of it with the publisher, I would say about 3 to 4 weeks ago. And the only thing left is we have to decide on a cover. But the title is Homicide Is My Business. And it will be out in the spring. I don't have a definitive date yet. So we'll talk about that one.
Yeah.
Because that one, if you will have me, that will generate probably 3, 4, or 5 of these podcasts because of the stories that are in that book are just remarkable.
Hell yeah.
And he was tangentially involved with the people who were behind the murder of Pope John Paul I. And I explain in the book why and how, but that's one of the kind of little tidbits that are in the book. So
well, to go back to what you were first saying, I like the sound of the other one you're writing about the devil coming to Brooklyn. Anytime someone kind of steps out of like their comfort zone and talks about things, your books are stories about what you've done. I like that. I like that idea of like an entity coming to Brooklyn. I have on Dale all the time, the Delta Force guy, but we've done a couple of podcasts where we talk about like meditations and kind of paranormal, and it's always interesting to see someone who like Dale, like an expert, Delta Force assassin. It's always fascinating to hear kind of a different side, what else are they interested in? Through what other lens do they view the world? So I think that's really cool that you're writing that. I like that.
Thank you. I like the idea. And I couldn't, believe it or not, the publishers and my agent were not necessarily interested in a book of short stories that would kind of be 60, 70 pages and then end, and then a new one would start, and then a new one would start. They needed some kind of connection among the stories in order to in their mind, make it attractive to a reader who likes, true crime. The crimes that I will have in this book are true. They happened, but I am now putting this kind of incentive from the devil as being the cause behind these crimes. And that gave me an opportunity to kind of weave them together, which I'm about to get started on. I've done the first part of the book, which is the setup, and it does talk about a particular crime that I was involved with. And now I'm going into, the second, third, fourth of these crimes. And the one little hook is that the character is his name is Michael Giocca, and Giocca loosely in Italian means gamble, and it's what kind of what his personality is. And I think I use him in one of the short stories. I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been The Hand of the Killer. We use his name, we use that character, I'm not sure, but I think that's the one. So Giocca is the setup is that he has convicted a law enforcement agent who's a very popular guy in law enforcement, and he convicted him of 4 murders. And this basically causes his boss, the DA, and law enforcement to basically treat him as a pariah. They didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore because they felt that he was a traitor to law enforcement. So he's kind of out there on his own, and he's down and out, and he has to do something in his mind to kind of get back into their good graces. And a case comes along involving the death of a young woman, and it turns out, and I don't want to give anything away, but it turns out that this death of the young woman was basically a test. It was a devil case. He didn't know it, but at the end, he's recruited because he had done so well. He's recruited by an agency that's been put together involving the Vatican and the Justice Department to fight this evil presence in Brooklyn. So that's
I like it, man. You're selling me on it. I like it. I like it.
I hope I can sell your listeners and viewers to buy it when it comes out.
You will. I'll get them to. I'll bludgeon them over the head.
Listen, if I can't get a publisher, I may just self-publish it, and then use forums like yours to
I'm down.
Talk it up. So
I'm down. I'm down for it. I don't give a shit. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Step outside of them. Who cares?
So that's what I'm in the process of doing. And but today I'm in the process of telling you the Thomas Parkin story, which is as I said before, kind of on the lighter side from the things that I was normally doing. And it's a story that, believe it or not, has its beginnings way back in 1996. That's not when I got involved, but it's when the story starts, and it involves 2 people, a mother and a son, who were living together in a home that the mother owned in the Park Slope section of Brooklyn. And for those of you who don't know Park Slope, who are listening, who don't know Park Slope, it's a very affluent area in Brooklyn. It's near the big park, Prospect Park. It's right off it, and the homes there are very, very expensive, and there's a lot of wealthy people who live there. So that's the setting, and the woman, whose name is Mrs. Prusik, Irene Prusik, owned this home, and at some point in '96 deeded the home, gave the home to her son, whose name was Thomas Parkin. And Parkin, Parkin was a character and is a character. He's alive, of course. And but he fancied himself as this, big, real estate entrepreneur, and that he, was going to take this now home that he owned, and he was going to make it the centerpiece of this real estate empire. But it didn't work out. And 4 years later, he had gotten into so much debt through the purchase of other properties, which went nowhere. He and his business partner, a guy named Romolo, made a lot of mistakes. bet on a lot of properties and basically lost a lot of money. So to pay off his debt, he took a $200,000 mortgage on this home that his mother had deeded to him. And he figured that he'd take the $200,000, he'd invest it again, and he would pay off the mortgage and continue to live off this money that he hoped was going to be generated from the use of this 200 grand back in the real estate business. Didn't work out that way, because soon, I would say within a couple of years, he could no longer make the mortgage payments, and he defaulted on the mortgage. And the home was sold, I think it was 2003, at a mortgage foreclosure auction. And these were held, believe it or not, and are held on the steps of the Supreme Court building in Brooklyn. What? It's unbelievable. Yeah, I used to run past them when I was a private attorney. I would go into the courthouse and I'd see this little group of people gathered on the steps of the courthouse. And the reason is because these auctions have to be public. They can't be, no one, I mean, it's not one of these insider trading thing. You can't do that. The property is put up for auction. People can bid on it, and it's got to be all done in public. And they do them on the steps of the courthouse. So a guy by the name of Samir Chopra, I believe his name was, purchased the property, right? So that year, 2003, Mrs. Prusik also passed away, coincidentally. Had nothing to do with the home or purchase of the home. And the son, Thomas, instead of mourning his mother's death, he was a typical con man, Tom. He took the opportunity to begin to impersonate his mother. Now, I'm sure that people are saying, well, how could some guy impersonate his mother? Well, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. You know what he did? He would dress and literally dress up like his mother, with her clothes, with her makeup, with her jewelry. And he enlisted Romolo, his business partner, to pretend to be Mrs. Prusik's nephew, to give weight and to give validity to this impersonation.
Well, I think it's important to go back, and really before that happened, though, like, it does escalate. Like, the thing is, The thing is like, yes. At first it starts as simply as just like, returning mail as this person, and kind of doing. It's like as simple as like if you logged into my computer and started emailing people as Tommy's podcast. Like, it started out very like little.
It actually starts out even before the mail situation. Is that what he did was when he had to bury his mother, he gave the funeral home so that no one would be able to know that the mother was dead. The body was turned over to the funeral home by Thomas. And he gave a false name for his mother. He gave the funeral home a false social security number. He also had a death certificate that was a forgery, which he gave to the funeral home in the name, this fictitious name. And she was buried under these false names and these false pieces of pedigree. So he did not want the city or the state or the federal government to know that his mother had died. Why? Because once he had gotten past the funeral home and once he had gotten her buried, what he had done is he never notified any of these agencies that his mother had passed, and they were still sending checks to his home. The home, by the way, that he didn't even own anymore, but he never left. He basically squatted in the home, and I'll get to that in a second. So he was getting Social Security checks in his mother's name. He was getting these city assistance checks in his mother's name. And he pretending to be the mother, would at some point go and cash these checks and put them in an account in his mother's name, which he now had basically taken over. So he then does something else. He then, because the home he's living in is no longer in his name, the deed is now in the name of this guy Chopra. He starts to file lawsuits in his pretending to be the mother against Chopra. And his deal was this: the quote unquote mother, Mrs. Prusik, said that the deed that Chopra purchased or received at the auction sale was basically a forgery by her son. So the mother, the fake mother, basically said that Chopra bought the home from, and the deed that he received was a deed that her son had forged and put in his name. Okay. And therefore, the sale was null and void because Chopra bought a home that had been stolen from her. Now, the point of this was this guy, Thomas Parkin, was trying to nullify the legitimate sale of the home to Chopra, the mortgage sale of the home, or the default mortgage sale of the home. He was trying to get some court to say, oh yeah, you know what, that was a stolen deed. The son is a piece of shit, excuse my expression. And the mother had the home stolen from her by her son. And of course, none of that was true. The mother deeded the home to Parkin and he lost it. The sale was totally legitimate. The the mortgage sale was totally legitimate. So to add authenticity to the lawsuits, he enlisted this guy, Romolo, the business partner, to pose as his mother's nephew and to swear that, you know what, Mrs. Parkin is correct. Thomas stole and forged that deed and stole that home from her. And then it was purchased by Chopra, none of which was legitimate. Turns out, though, that Parkin and Romolo were as bad in bringing these lawsuits as they were in the real estate business. Every single one of the lawsuits, and there were several, were dismissed by a judge. They didn't have the ability to, and nor did they have the evidence to show a judge that what they were trying to peddle was in fact correct. Judge didn't buy Romolo, didn't buy the paperwork that was filed. It never worked. So, but keep in mind now, Tom, from 2003 to 2008, when Chopra comes to the DA's office, comes to us, Parkin was still living in that house. And Chopra was trying to get him out. He was trying to get him out, and he couldn't get him out. So finally he comes to the rackets division and he complains that he's the subject of what he called criminal harassment because Parkin in the guise of his mother, and of course Chopra had no reason to believe that the mother wasn't alive, and her son, he came to us and said, Prusik, the mother, and the son were filing false affidavits against them in court, attempting to get back the house that he legitimately bought. And he complained to us, as I just said, this guy Parkin and his mother are still in the house. I can't get them out. They just won't leave. So the reason he came to us is very simple. We established during the Obama years, when there was the crisis, the home mortgage crisis occurred, where people were losing their homes because they had been sucked into these balloon type mortgages and couldn't pay after a year or two. And people were stealing homes it's an easy steal, believe it or not. So we established a unit in our office, in our division, my division, called the mortgage fraud unit. And these are the kinds of cases that we were getting. So Chopra came to us he told us all of the things that I'm telling you about the sale, about the mother, about the son. And of course, he didn't know that Mrs. Prusik was dead. He didn't know that Parkin had kept her, quote unquote, alive. So we started an investigation. And by the way, I gave the investigation to the investigators, our financial investigators, who I had a group of in the rackets division. They were all ex-IRS agents. So they knew their way around money. They knew their way around these kinds of deals. So word got out that there's an investigation. And what happens one day, the guy, the lawyer who I put in charge of this, the ADA, comes to me and says, Mike, you're not going to believe this. You know who's here? Parkin. He came into the office to complain about Chopra. So he preemptively, to throw this investigation into total chaos, he reported that he and his mother were actually the victims of mortgage fraud, that someone signed this deed and forged it, and Chopra bought it, and Chopra was involved in the scam, and he illegally sold their home. So now we had who was telling the truth? Because right now, at this point, we didn't know that Mrs. Prusik was dead. So who's telling the truth? Was it Chopra? Was it Parkin? Was his mother available to talk? So Parkin still stayed in the home, right? And he still collected. We figured roughly over 6 years, he had about $52,000 in monthly Social Security payments that he stole from the federal government, about $65,000 from in rental assistance or some other kind of human resources agency payment from the city, all in the name of his mother. And he loved it. It was simple. Every month, this dope would stay in the house. We'd collect the Social Security checks. He gave a little bit to Romolo, and then he tried to fool us into thinking that he was the victim. It turns out, obviously, he wasn't. And the more we got into this investigation, the more my guys discovered that the Social Security number was false. Very easy to check. Just call Social Security and check the number. The date of birth for this fictitious woman was a complete false date of birth. No birth certificate existed, nothing. He just made up a name, made up a date, but we were able to put the lie to that. And the death certificate was, we were able to get an expert to tell us that it was false. It was a forgery. So we started to now understand that Parkin was hiding his mother's death, and he did it for many, many different reasons. The most of them were money reasons, many dollar reasons, I should say.
Yeah, Social Security checks, just year in and out.
Yeah. Now, we also then learned that Parkin, with Romolo's help, would apply in person for assistance with the city. He would dress, as I said before, in a wig, dark glasses, his mother's clothes, his mother's jewelry, and he would literally go to city agencies dressed this way to file for papers, file for assistance from the city, and he pulled it off. We were able to, so we also did one other thing. We started checking what you would normally check. Things like, as I said before, birth certificate, Social Security number, death certificate, but also we were told that Mrs. Prusik had a driver's license. So now we said to ourselves, well, if we believe that Mrs. Prusik is dead, how is she getting a renewed driver's license? Because we found out that there was a recent renewal of her driver's license. So thank God for security cameras. We were able to go to DMV. We figured out when he went or when she went to DMV in Brooklyn. DMV meaning the Department of Motor Vehicles. And we found a video.
Fucking Miss Doubtfire.
Of Parkin posing as his mother, approaching the counter at the Department of Motor Vehicles with Romolo, her nephew, holding her arm so that she can make it to the counter, dressed to the nines, Tom. Wig, dark glasses, her clothes, makeup. He did makeup too to make sure that that he could fool everyone. And he renewed her driver's license with the assistance of her quote unquote nephew, this guy Romolo. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you're gonna go for a crime, I mean, I got to give him credit for dedication, right? Chopra goes and files a complaint. No, you one up him and go and file a complaint back. If you're gonna impersonate, stop with the emails, put on a dress and some glasses and lipstick. I mean, if you're gonna do it, go all in. If you're gonna go like Ocean's 11, you got to go full. Don't half-ass it. Like
exactly. Hey Tom, let me tell you something. Look, we're not in the business. We weren't in the business of admiring criminals, but we said to ourselves, man, this guy has gone to the nth degree to pull this fraud off. And
just join the CIA. Like you could be doing this shit on Uncle Sam's dime. Like go work overseas. You could be an undercover guy. And
amazing. And this guy had the gift of gab, man. He was good at he's good with the statements and with the talking and he was just good at it. So we decided then, we said, listen, man, we got to start putting the screws to this guy. So we said to him, we want you to come into the office so that we can take a statement from you on videotape in which, and we did this for a reason. We wanted him to come in and tell us his story, tell us what the crime was, because he had made the complaint, but he never made the complaint on tape. So now we were trying to kind of put the screws to him. Plus, it also was important for us to have this evidence later on in the event that we were going to be able to indict him and arrest him. So we asked them, we said, would you come into our office and give us a videotape statement of what happened with Chopra, your mom's house, and you? Okay, the guy, you would think, maybe he would think twice now and say, well, I don't know if I want to do that. Not Thomas. He came into the office and he was interviewed by our ex-IRS agents and the ADA who was in charge of our unit. And they said to me afterwards, Mike, he said, this guy is good.
CIA
He's
material.
compelling.
I'm telling you,
He's
CIA.
compelling. He laid out the fraud done to him and his mother by Chopra. He said Chopra forged Parkin's name on this deed. And Parkin was basically not successful, but was good at selling this bullshit. He was just good. He was a perfect con man. He was very good at it. But now they said to me, but Mike, here's what we want to do. And they did it. They came in while he was still there. They came in to me, talked to me about it. We talked it over. And they said, we want him now to bring his mother. We want him to bring his mother into the office so that we can hear what she has to say about the fraud. Because now we started to get suspicious. And we figured if the mother was a fiction of this guy's imagination, or a phony person which we thought, then this was going to be the way to kind of root it out. So I said, go ahead, ask him. I mean, this guy's going to say, are you crazy? I'm not bringing my mother in here. She's too old. She's gave some experience, some excuse. They came back after he left. I said, what did he say? He said, yeah, he'll let us interview his mother. I almost fell out of my chair, Tom. I said, are you kidding me? He said, but wait a second. Mike. He doesn't want to bring his mother into the office. He wants us to go out to the mother's home because, you know, she's of ill health and, you know, she can't travel. Now, we didn't know what was in store for us, but we still had the idea that if this mother and he are in the same room, well, then Chopra's a liar.
Yeah, Prusik might actually be alive.
Correct. If they're not in the same room, well, then we have our feelings will be, you know, kind of ratified. So a date was set by our investigators to meet Mrs. Prusik at her home. And we told Parkin, we told him that we would be videotaping the interview. And of course, this didn't scare him away. He said, okay, you know, no problem. So now, of course, I'm telling you what the detectives told me later and in what I saw for myself on the video. So when they get there to his home, to her home, Romolo is there and he's the kind of the host. He ushered them into a room. I laugh at this even when I retell it after all these years, where Parkin, and they were certain now that it was Parkin, or where Mrs. quote unquote, Mrs. Prusik was sitting on a couch or in a chair, dressed with a red cardigan sweater, makeup, real red makeup, lipstick, I should say, manicured nails, Tom, manicured nails, dark glasses, her hair nicely done. The new addition, however, was this. Romolo tells my investigators that she has to have an oxygen mask on her face because, and over her nose because of her illness. Now, of course, that was to disguise several things, to make it a little bit more difficult to figure out.
Dental, right? I mean, you can't fake teeth.
The teeth, the voice, you know. So I saw this interview. They interviewed Mrs. Prusik, and she told the whole bullshit story about the house having been stolen from her, that her son's name forged on the deed, that she wanted her home back, and she wanted it free and clear, and that Chopra should be locked up and thrown, and the key thrown away because he stole her home. I watched this videotape and it was hilarious because we now knew that obviously this was Parkin. So what my investigators did while they were still at the home, they said to Romolo, by the way, is Thomas Parkin here? Is he around the house? Because we'd like to speak to him to clear up some things that were quote unquote not so clear from Mrs. Prusik. We had difficulty hearing her. Romolo was great at this as well. He's a con man as well. He said, gentlemen, unfortunately, Mr. Parkin had some business to take care of out of the home and he's not here, but I will make sure that I give him the message that you need to speak to him to clear up some of these issues that Mrs. Prusik was unable to elucidate the way that she should have. That was it. That was the seal on this.
I'm just thinking of like, it's all undeniably insane, but then it takes on a different level when you realize it's like, well, what was it that they were, was this that they were the heirs to like a $400 million estate in the Hamptons? It was just a fucking home. Yep. It wasn't even like Jay Leno's car collection or something.
No,
it was just a home.
Right. But here's the thing, Tom. You're correct. But remember in the beginning, I told you what kind of a neighborhood Park Slope was? Okay. So keep in mind now, 1996 was when the home was deeded to Thomas.
Yeah.
Now talking about 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010, while the investigation, the real estate prices and the real estate value in
Okay.
Park Slope was now the home. He got a $200,000 mortgage. The home was probably worth over $1 million, $1.5 million.
Okay.
Maybe
All right. So it's not,
Okay.
so it's not change. All right.
Correct.
All right. All right. Touche.
So, so the guys got back to the office. They came in, they're laughing. Mike, you're not going to believe this. And we're going to show you the video. But then they tell me the story that I just told you, that Parkin was dressed as his mother, pretending to be his mother. And clearly to the guys who were there and actually interviewed him. Oh, and the idea that Parkin was not home, so they couldn't get the two of them in the same room together. Why? Because there were no two of them. There was only one.
That's where he fucked up. Why didn't he get someone else to dress up?
He didn't think that far ahead. Well, no, he had come into the office. So we would have, why didn't he get someone else to dress up?
When they came to the house and he could be sitting there next to his mom.
Correct.
I mean, it seems like you're already this far in. Why wouldn't you just go on Craigslist?
But you know something? The only one that he trusted was Romolo. And Romolo had been playing the role of the nephew.
Yeah.
So that was what the problem was. But you're correct. And the con man didn't figure out that he didn't expect us. Now, my guys are really sharp. He didn't expect them to ask to see him and her at the same time, you know.
But I mean, you got to think that through, though. Like, you've got to, right? I mean, that's missed out fire, right? You have them both together. Like, I mean, that's the thing, right? Bring them in together in the same room. I mean,
criminals.
Yeah.
Thank God criminals make mistakes. Otherwise, we'd never solve any crimes. And they're not geniuses. He was good, but he missed this. This would not have gone over very well if he was in the Sting, you know, with Redford and the name escapes me now, who the other person was in the Sting. But
at a certain point, you know, it's like Frank Abagnale kind of getting like brought on by the FBI. Man, at a certain point, I mean, you gotta almost want to like forward the manila folder with the document. You almost want to like forward it to Langley and be like, hey, this guy is committed. He doesn't blink in the face of being interrogated.
Right.
Maybe you want to put him overseas.
Tom, I watched that. I watched that video. He had it down. He had the story down, right? He look to the uneducated eye, so to speak. They would have fooled that video would have fooled that person. It would have fooled him because
it got me.
He had, and with that, and it was, I'll tell you what was a nice touch. That oxygen mask really was a nice touch, because that kind of disguised the other things that we talked about that would have blown the whole thing open. So
also sitting in the chair, that does a lot, because that removes similar gait or posture. I mean,
correct. And the sweater and the whole 9 yards. Now, so we had the videotape at the DMV. We had this videotape. We had them check, you know, I told you before, the social security number faults, the death certificate faults, what was the other thing? I forgot.
Driver's license.
The driver's license being false. So what was left is I didn't want to have any holes. I said, listen, guys, go to the cemetery where this fictitious woman is buried, and let's see if, you know, that name, whatever it was, I forgot what the name was that he had given to her, is buried at the cemetery. And sure enough, they went, and there was a tombstone in the cemetery, in the name of the person. The fake Mrs. Prusick's name was on that tombstone. So now we were absolutely positively certain that that he was, he was a liar, and he did this whole thing, this forgery to continue to get money and to get that house back, because it was worth a lot of money. I'm telling you. So, he wanted to continue getting the Social Security checks, the city checks, whatever the welfare check that his mother was getting. So we had enough. I went to the grand jury. We indicted him for grand larceny, mortgage fraud. Romolo was also indicted for his role acting in concert. And then the case was assigned to a judge. Romolo, I'll make it quick now. Romolo doesn't test the jury system. He says, I'm pleading guilty because he got a good deal.
The gig is out.
He pled guilty to grand larceny. He's sentenced to 3 years in jail. Okay. Not an insignificant sentence, but he knew what he was facing if he went to trial and got, and was convicted. About a year later, or maybe 6 months later, Parkin goes to trial. Now, here's a very interesting part of the story. Parkin's in Rikers Island, right, awaiting trial. And I come home one night to my apartment in the Carroll Gardens section of Brooklyn. It's an old neighborhood, all small, like 2-3-story houses, all owned by, some of them were rentals, some of them were owned, but they all had these little stoops in front. And I parked my car, my office car, I would say about 5 or 6 of these houses away from my home. And I start, it's evening. It's probably around, it's more than evening. It's nighttime. It's probably around 11 o'clock at night and it's dark. We had like one street light was out, and I'm walking down from my car down towards my home. And as I'm walking, I always kept my eyes open and was aware of my surroundings. And I see a guy from across the street from where my home is, diagonally coming across the street towards me. There's no one else on the street, Tom. No one. Me and this unknown guy. I had never seen the guy before. And he diagonally, and I say to myself, oh shit, now what? What do I have in my hands? I got basically my folder. I didn't know what. So I started to kind of think about how I was going to handle this because I knew that something was up. This guy, I mean, he was, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it really kind of set me off because
Sure.
I didn't know what was going to happen. So I get to about where my stoop is, this 4 or 5 steps leading up to my apartment. And this guy now crosses and comes right up to me. And here's what he says to me. Counselor. Now, for those of your listeners and viewers who don't understand that, when someone calls an attorney that in this world, the world that I was in, that was not a put down, but it was a very, I don't know, it was a way of referring to someone that a lawyer, instead of calling him by his name, it's hard to describe what the feeling is, but it was not a friendly, a friendly
Sure.
greeting.
Sure.
So I said, yeah, who are you? He says, I think I'll make up a name because I don't remember his name. He says, I'm Dominic from across the street. I'm your neighbor. I said, Dominic, I never saw you around here. What do you want with me? He goes, are you the guy that's prosecuting that guy who dressed up like his mother and stole all that money? I said, yeah. Thinking to myself, is this Parkin's got somebody to come and
Sure.
do something? I said, yeah, why? He says, I'm a correction officer. And that guy is on my block and in my wing. He says, when are you going to convict him and send him away because he's the biggest pain in the ass that we have in the jail? He makes trouble all the time for everybody. I said, I kind of let out a sigh of relief. I laughed. I tell you, Tom, I was laughing on the street. I said, yeah, I know. It's coming. Don't worry. His trial is starting soon. We're going to get him out of here. He goes, oh, thank you. He said, you have no idea what a problem this guy is. And none of my fellow officers wanted to deal with this guy. And I seem to get stuck with him all the time. And I can't stand him. I said, patience. we're getting it. We're good.
It,
So
I was
go ahead.
thinking, oh yeah, I was thinking if he's buying into, if he's going all in, right? He's going both feet in. He's not dipping his toes in. He's full on doing a cannonball to take this thing. You think that they would eventually you cut your losses and you don't plead. But I would say beforehand, what you do is you cut your losses and you say, my mother just passed away last night. And then you go, maybe she wasn't telling the truth and maybe this home is trope. At a certain point,
Yeah, there are ways of getting around it, but his ego was too.
Man, they could have just said she was dead.
He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. His ego. I mean,
Yeah.
he was just basically saying to us, listen, fuck you. I'm going to beat you guys.
Yeah.
He was, these guys these con men believe that they can con themselves out of everything. And he was going to do it in a courtroom.
Yeah.
So the case goes to trial. We put the whole case in, and the jury deliberated for less than a day. And of course, what do you think happened? He gets convicted. Jury didn't buy his bull crap, and he is now stuck. So on the sentencing day, the judge says to him, this is how he began his little spiel before he pronounced sentence. He said, Mr. Parkin, you're an amazing character. And that said it all. And then he lowered the boom. He sentenced them to 13 and a half to 41 years in jail.
Jesus.
That was unbelievable to us. I have had guys who killed people who didn't get 41 years in jail. And
what do you think
Parkin
that was?
What's that?
What do you think that was? Was it all the fraud, all the Social Security fraud?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, is that what? Yeah, what gave him 41 as opposed to like you've talked about murderers who will maybe get like 7?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh no, what that was the judge was adding. So this crime carried maybe 5 to 15, and then another crime carried 8 years. So he put all of the crimes together, all of the sentences together, and that's what he came up with. I am sure that part of what was in the judge's mind was the way that Parkin acted and handled himself at the trial. I'm positive that that's why. And the judge at that time, also keep in mind, the mortgage fraud problem and theft of homes in Brooklyn was exploding.
That's true.
And the judge had to send a message. Listen, This is how easy it is. You could get a guy like him to go into the city register's office, get all the information necessary from a home, because these are public records. The deeds are public records, and get a blank quit claim deed. It's a very simple piece of paper. Fill it all out, all the information that you need to fill out. Forge it, saying that Tom Carrigan, the real owner, gave on this quit claim deed to Mike Vecchione, and he had forged papers. Do you think the city is going to check every single piece of paper when he again gets the city register to stamp it? And now he's got a deed that he can now take to a bank and say, I need a mortgage on this. I need, whatever it is, and use that as collateral for all kinds of use it as collateral for all kinds of loans.
Yeah.
Now the loans will never get paid back, of course. He's got the money in his pocket and they take off. That's how easy it was and was happening to people back then. We would have people come into our office. It's people who own their home for 35, 40 years. Elderly people who would come in and say, Mr. Vecchione, my house is gone. Some guy came and knocked on my door and said that I have to get out because he owns my house. said, I never sold as my house to this guy. He had some kind of paper. He showed it to me, and now he wants me out, and they're kicking me out of my house. We had that. I can't tell you how many times, Tom.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other scam was that these mortgage companies were getting people to take these balloon mortgages where you would pay a little bit at the beginning of first year, second year, and then they would balloon into payments that were way beyond what a guy could pay, and they would fall into foreclosure. But the whole thing was a scam to begin with, because they never had, these people who were taking these loans out never had the the collateral, the work record, anything like that to get a legitimate mortgage. These mortgage companies were doing it so they could steal the house basically at the end of the term. So that's, I think, was what was in the judge's mind, in addition to Parkin being a complete pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. And look, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, right? The guy who was the correction officer, had nothing to do with any of these cases, comes and tells me that I need to get this guy out of his hair because he's such a pain in the ass,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I guess it does make sense, right? Because it's right after 2008, right? Worst economic downturn since
correct.
since the Great
Correct.
Depression, and it's
Correct.
maybe you're sending a message, and it's and he did real world damage, right? I mean, not to say that a murder isn't real world damage, but here's a guy who not only did this, but was also gaming the system, right? Social Security, getting the welfare checks, getting this, fucking people out of their it's like the anthrax scare a couple months after 9/11, and like the hammer of the entire national security apparatus comes down on anyone who is doing anything. And it's like a couple months after 9/11, and now some assholes mailing anthrax spores. And it's like, now is not the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And think about how important it was to this guy, and how clever he thought he was by basically going to these city agencies dressed like his dead mother.
Well, it's also poses future danger. What else is this guy? This guy doesn't back down,
Correct. And I'm sure that when and if he gets out, some agency, some prosecuting agency will hear from Thomas Parkin again,
Yeah.
And Romolo also I don't want to say helped us. I don't think he testified, but Romolo basically, when he pled guilty, gave it all up. So, I mean, and he did it before the trial. So we were certain that we were on strong grounds. And when anyone saw, when we played those videos in the courtroom to the jury, I mean, it's very apparent when you start out by telling him that this is what they should be looking for, that it was a guy who was disguising himself as his mother. And our investigator, the guy who was really the one behind this, is a guy named Vinny Verleza, ex-IRS agent, the nicest guy that you ever want to meet, Tom. He has such a great way with the jury in terms of explaining the investigation and explaining to them how he was able to determine that this was basically Parkin dressing up as his mother. I mean, Vinny was terrific. And the jury obviously realized that this was not some scamming cop looking to just get anybody and put him in jail. They knew that Vinny was right on the money. So, so Parkin was a case, one of those things that I'll never forget, and it was, we had shortly after this, not that it's the same kind of thing, but we had another kind of con that I did write about, and I think we've already talked about it, is the dentist who was stealing, the bones and tissue out of cadavers. And the con there was that he was forging death certificates and sending, clean blood down to these processing companies in the South who will process bone and tissue to use in transplanting, in transplant operations, et cetera. So, these guys, the more that they practice at this, and if they're good looking and speak well, then they're gonna be very, they're gonna be very successful. And Parkin was one of those guys, and you know, and Romolo too. I had to tell you, Romolo was like an actor. He had the kind of the air of you know, a stage actor. He, you know, the way that he spoke, and he was so debonair and so suave, that kind of thing. Keep in mind, he was the guy who basically was putting in his mind, the truth to the story of Prusik and Parkin. I mean, that he was the guy who validated it in their minds, and he was good at it. He was good at it, and he's lucky he only got 3 years. But he was not keeping the money.
Yeah,
you know, he was probably getting some cut from Parkin, but he was not the guy who was keeping all of the and it was not the guy signing the papers to collect illegally, you know, the Social Security checks and all the rest. So Parkin was lucky that the feds let us do this case, because the Social Security scam fraud would have probably cost him a lot more in terms of time.
yeah.
But 41 years is a pretty good sentence. So it's a good lesson for people. And you know, I would say that I think it was probably 2013, the last year that the DA, Mr. Hines, was the district attorney. CBS came to us and wanted to do a series, a 6-part, I think it was 6-part series called Brooklyn DA. And they wanted us to come up with the cases, and we would do, the guys who handle the cases would do talking. In some situations, we're in the middle of investigations, and we allowed the cameras to be part of the investigation, so that as it was going on, they would see what was happening. And the Parkin case was one of the ones that when we told them about it, they jumped all over it. CBS. They said, "Oh, we got to have that. That's got to be part of this." And they, of course, played the videotape at the DMV, and it was a good part of the story of the series. That was one of the stories that they liked the best. So Parkin was one of these guys who won't be forgotten by me. That's for sure. You know, so
it's almost a shame that, you know, that guy or the dentist, or, you know, it's almost a shame if they just took that ingenuity and like don't take no for an answer and like find the way to get it done mindset. I mean, they're so close to the same mindset of like wildly successful CEOs.
Correct.
Right? I mean,
correct.
Like Elon Musk starting a car company during a recession, or, you know, Steve Jobs, you know, getting booted from the company he started, then coming back. Like these are the mindsets of a Tom Brady, of someone that doesn't give up and will bend the world to get it done, but they pigeonholed themselves with fraud. And it's like,
and in their minds, took the easy way out. Why work hard when I can scam my way to money? You know,
well, it's got to be part of it, right? There's probably a different high to knowing that you're deceiving people, as opposed to you're you know, getting an IPO on your business or something.
And greed is quite a motivator. You know, it's really an amazing thing with the dentist. This is a guy who graduated from Villanova, then he got a master's degree, then he got his dental degree and dental license, and he was a very well respected dental surgeon. And he, but the problem with him, see, here's where he went bad, was that he became addicted to the drugs that he was actually using in his surgery, Demerol, and that was his downfall. You know, had he not allowed himself, or was so weak to get himself addicted to this, he would have been extremely successful at the job and at the profession that he studied for. It was a shame. And this guy was a good-looking guy. He was a football player at Villanova. I mean, Villanova is not Division I, but it has a good football program. He was a good football player, a great football player, from what I was told, and was this good-looking guy, is smart, and the drugs were his downfall. I'm sure with Parkin, it was just simply greed, simply greed. And you could say, oh, maybe he was disappointed that his attempts to become, a real estate
Sure.
baron didn't work out, and that, he was angry at himself for that, or angry at the world for that. I don't know. But the bottom line is he compounded his misdeeds by coming to us and trying to fool us like we were stupid, that we would just simply fall for his impersonation of his mother. Well, he figured that, we didn't know what his mother looked like, right? So, we had no idea until we started to do the things that investigators do, to check to see whether or not the things that you are filing, the things you're telling us, the things that are there to look at are in fact correct and not simply forgeries,
Yeah.
So probably if he was a little smarter, as opposed to being clever, he would not have done what he had done. His downfall was the idea of being, he was so egotistical that when we said to him, we'd like to have your mother testify. Oh, well, of course. That was an ego thing.
Yeah.
Same thing with him.
Yeah.
And him going to the DMV dressed as his mother, and to the city agencies and to the federal agencies dressed as his mother. All ego. I'm sure in his mind, he was saying, these people are, who are they? They're so stupid. They're not anywhere close to my mentality, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
which is ultimately downfall. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good case. And you could see why I said at the beginning that this was a lighter case as opposed to, the one we talked about last time with the death of the woman on the boardwalk and the
all things considered, it's hands down the lightest story we've done. Maybe up there with like the maraschino cherries,
the red bees. Yeah.
Even that was well, even that you could say that was like, kind of like drug trafficking. This is probably the lightest, all things considered. I'd say this is the lightest story.
And the reason that I always talk about it or want to talk about it is because of the idea of this guy trying to pull off the fact that his mother was still alive after he buried her, and that he tried to do that by disguising himself as her.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's the mindset is like, if you're gonna go, I mean, I know I keep saying this, and sure, it wasn't just a nothing home, it was a home, and New York real estate, right? Always gonna be worth more. But man, if you're gonna go this deep, like at least try to pull like an Enron or something. Try to get or some Bernie Madoff. Try to get a couple billion out of it. Like if you're gonna go this deep, I mean, go take gold. Don't take bronze.
That I have found that there are no perfect crimes, but these guys still strive to do that. They think that that they will pull it off.
Yeah, it's got to be the rush. It's the ego of, right. I mean, $1 is better than $1 earned. It's
and and to him, the guy, believe it, the guy had nothing. So I mean, being able to get back a home that was probably worth, as I said to you before, by that time, over $1 million is was something that he needed to do. He needed to try to get it. So. He wasn't satisfied with scamming the government out of, close to 100 grand over the course of several years. So, we have to be thankful. When I was in law enforcement, would say we have to be thankful for these guys are not geniuses. They're not. There are no, there are no criminals like that. No matter how smart they believe they are, there's always a mistake that they make, and it's our job. It was my job to find that mistake, and exploit it, and we did. And this one, it was pretty easy, So, but you imagine, we also found out one other thing about him. When he had, he was so, I guess, egotistical that he didn't have his the funeral. He was not funeral, but the wake for his mother was an open wake. I mean, I don't understand how he thought that, he'd be able to have this open wake and still pull this off. But he got pretty far from the time his mother died until the time he went to jail, scamming everybody, So,
maybe
I know I've said this many times, but the ego is a real issue with guys like this, So
maybe he's not CIA material.
No.
Yeah, I'm realizing that as I go on. I'm like, the CIA material guys are the guys that there aren't stories about because they never got caught.
Exactly.
They never got caught, and then they're like, "Hey, you want to come serve your country?" Yeah. No, not this moron. Mike,
anyway, so
let's wrap this one up, and I'll text you. And as always, we'll schedule the next one. And
terrific.
Again, for everybody listening, if you would like much darker stories than these, Crooked Brooklyn and Friends of the Family, and as you co-authored, Behind the Murder Curtain, all of which are just cavalcades of horror and murder and rape and extortion and butchering bodies and crushing skulls, and it's
exactly. And the two short stories available on Amazon, which is Hand of the Killer
and Murder on the Bridge.
Talk about dark stories.
And you talk about real like evidence of of Satan. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, some of the stories you tell, you really start to look at it and you're like, are there dark forces in the world? Because you look at this guy, right? Fraud, and you're like, yeah, he's going after money, but that's as old as humans itself, right? Follow the money. Some of the stories, though, I know for me have actually made me, a lot of podcasts I've done with a lot of different guests has sort of led me to start praying again. I'm not even kidding. Primarily with Charlie Duke, who walked on the moon, he talked about it. And that kind of was one of the things that kind of got me, obviously losing a brother. These are all things that kind of move me back towards establishing some sort of relationship with God.
Good.
Whatever it may be. And I'm not trying to proselytize or like sling anything in it. Whatever you find, maybe it's yours, Buddha, Allah, I don't give a shit, whatever. But, and then there are some stories where you're like, is there actual, is there the Delta Force guys, and they tell stories, and it's, finding homes with like, young girls like blindfolded and like in rooms with on the floor covered with their own shit and piss, and they're 8 years old and they're chained to a wall and they're a sex slave. At a certain point, you're like, this isn't Enron or Bernie Madoff. At a certain point, and Murder on the Bridge is one of those where it's what I'm getting at is you start to go, is this just a crime? You're like, or is this evil? Is there like a spiritual aspect to it? You're like, is this demonic? Like, is this?
If you remember from that story, I do say that to me, Raymond Vargas, who was the defendant, the killer, was the devil. And the way to me, what caused me to do that is the barbarity of what he did to this young woman for nothing. He thought that he was going to rob her, but then to kill his best friend, who had an older guy who he had been depending on to help him out with money, with a place to stay, with food, to kill him. That's, to me, is exactly why I called him that. And it's kind of was always here in my head. And it gave me the idea of, maybe this will work as far as this, what I call that true crime fantasy, so.
At a certain point, it's, it's like the soldiers liberating the concentration camps. Like, war is hell, but there was something about that was like, what the fuck is this?
Right.
I think there are aspects of that, and and I don't know. I'm 31. I certainly don't have the answers to the universe, but in my short time on this earth, at a certain point, you start looking at things and you're like, what is just a money grab, right? What is 2008? What's scamming? Whatever. What's a Ponzi scheme? And what is just like a dark force? Who knows? But I'm covering my bases and saying a prayer. I don't need this shit in my life. Get that.
I'll say a couple of prayers for you as well. All right.
Thank you, sir. And I'll say them back to you, Mr. Mike Vecchione. Put all the books in the description. Obviously, always, man. It's always a
having me.
pleasure. I always love having you on, man. And I'll shoot you a text sometime today, and we'll schedule the next one. And
Terrific.
yeah, all your writings, everything will be in the description as always. I promise you'll enjoy them, and go back and listen to these podcasts that I've done with Mr. Vecchione, and they're all blast. And till next time, brother.
Take
care,
care.
Mike.
Happy
God bless.
Thanksgiving.
You as well, man. Thank you.